sort of variations between developed and developing countries and how, they emit relative to each other, and of course the relative impacts that both parts of the world face. Do you think it's possible for developing countries of the world to sort of, ensure that they put themselves on a path to development and growth while also ensuring, climate justice and, of course that it's I know it's a cliche debate, but I would like you to
yeah, you can see what's happening here. I keep trying to get away from countries, and you try to keep bringing me back to countries as if countries is the right unit. It's not, right? When I see the planet from space, I don't see countries. There isn't a line. Aapne dekhi kabhi? Have you seen a line between the US and Canada? I haven't. I've seen many pictures from space. Right? I've actually even crossed that, and there isn't. There is just sort of this man-made thing there. So what I'm not
I think you haven't, sir.
I'm not trying to be facetious, but what I'm saying is,
you haven't met visa officers on the Buffalo border.
Yeah, but those visa officers with guns just went and sat there. Right? It's not a natural reality.
Yeah.
Right? It's a construct, like so many, like growth. Right? Growth is not a real thing. Growth is a construct of not very bright economists, unfortunately. It's a recent thing and it will go away. Development is a real thing. Prosperity is a real thing. But the gospel of growth is something that we should be thinking very, very seriously about. Then you use the term developing country. My dear departed friend, Wolfgang Sachs, who wrote the Development Dictionary, used to point this out, that, we created this thing called developing country. Ye kahan se aayi thi? Right? For most of human history, that is not a thing. And then suddenly Truman makes a speech and divides the world between developed and developing. And then the job of every developing country, the ping is important, is to follow the path of the other country, make every mistake that the developed countries have done, because somehow a few of the economists have convinced us that the right path is this path of growth from developing to developed. And therefore, we have to repeat every mistake that they have done. Now, again, I'm not trying to be facetious. What I'm saying is we need to interrogate these concepts. The question of prosperity, the question of quality of life are very real. But this gospel of growth is actually absurd, because the gospel of growth says that at every given point, you have to be bigger than before. There are laws of physics that say that can't happen. Right? So apart from first-year economics students, I don't think anyone believes that. And we've sort of taken this thing, again, I know I will get a lot of brickbats here, and I'm not, as I said, I'm not trying to be facetious. What I am trying to say is we need to think about development seriously. We need to think about the role of being a developing country, right? This label that was imposed on us. And therefore, from the day that Asad Ijaz Butt is born, Asad's only goal in life is to develop, to grow, right? Now, just play that out experimentally in a lab. So you keep growing indefinitely. And what are the implications? And just unwind it. And that's what we are seeing. So in many ways, I think the best economists today have also gotten past this thing and have realized that what we are really interested in is, what Mehboob used to call human development, what you might call human well-being, what you might call prosperity, right? Yet when you ask someone, how are you? They don't tell you your growth rate. They tell you, no, but that is true, right? This is just sort of this little filigree that keeps a few people busy. What do they tell you when you ask someone, how are you? So I teach development, and essentially I argue that the only question that tells you what development is how are you? That's a question people ask all over the world. Try it tomorrow. What will people say? They nearly always say three and only three things. They will tell you about health, wealth, and knowledge. Right? And that was Mehboob Haq's idea of human development. But the point I'm trying to say is, I know I'm picking on your words, that especially the climate crisis is an opportunity, is an invitation to rethink these terms that sort of came up very recently. For most of human history, there was no such thing called developing country. Right? This is an artifact of the 1940s, so not even 100 years old. This idea of growth as a national goal is not even 100 years old. Prosperity is thousands of years old. Well-being is thousands of years old. Security is thousands of years old, right? Community is thousands of years old. So this is sort of this gospel of sort of a set of ideas that came as half-baked after the war. And again, there is a lot of value in some of these ideas, but they also need to be interrogated. I think the top economists in the world today, for example, therefore do not talk about growth in that sense. They talk about development, they talk about prosperity, they talk about human well-being, they talk about human potential, they talk about human capacities, they talk about human capabilities, right? And it is us, to turn into Urdu, truck ki batti ke piche laga diya कि तुम्हारा काम development में नहीं है, growth है, right? So all of you, economics 101 हमने कर लिया, now all of you run after this growth wali batti as if that is your goal in life. So I know I've blown up, probably messed up your interview, but I do think that we need to rethink, not our purpose on earth, but how we have lived. What is our role within that? How are we placed in nature? What is nature's role for our prosperity? What is our role for nature's well-being?
Sir, this conversation is taking an interesting angle because I want to ask another question about countries.
Sure.
I hope you would allow me the opportunity to do so.
Sure. Your interview.
So, sir, I do understand the fact that it's that we must not talk about growth now. It's an outdated idea. Agreed. We must. It's a shared commodity. We should deal it at the level of individuals as opposed to countries. But you do also understand that given that this is a shared commodity, a lot of conversation, and given also that countries exist and borders exist, and it's a living reality. A lot of negotiations, in terms of how this shared commodity and would be preserved and how we would deal with the environment has to happen at the level of leaders and countries, and the policy agenda has to be developed through either a consensus or uniformly, or perhaps through these negotiations. So do you see that there is a very strong policy element also involved in this, and there's a role that countries have to play?
Sure. No, they do. I mean, I've spent my whole life studying how countries behave in global environmental politics, how they negotiate. But that does not mean that we think only in countries. So countries are a reality. Yeah. I'm not going sort of. And again, even with growth, sort of think about it, right? So how we conventionally you have been sort of measuring it. So what happens to growth after a flood? Supposedly the country grows.
Yeah.
People lose their homes. What happens? The economy grows. Why does it grow? Because now that my house is gone, I have to rebuild. So I sell my savings that I was doing for my daughter's marriage, and I buy sort of so that I can rebuild. Right? What does some economist sitting somewhere do? They say, "Oh, the economy is growing."
Yeah, there's more production.
GDP, and GDP is essentially just the transaction of money, right? If you buy heroin, that's growth, right? I mean, that's how we measure growth. And so you have seen this actually with floods. The economy also grows because, right after that, as we are seeing in the numbers today, because sediment comes in the Pakistan case. We are a flood-driven agriculture, so you see some of that. But you see this after earthquakes, you see this after natural disasters, you see this after floods, that because there is more economic activity, the numbers suggest there is growth, right? And all I'm saying is growth too is real. I mean, despite what I have said, I'm not saying throw it out, but I'm saying think about it sensibly. Growth is not the goal. The goal is human well-being, right? So would you like a country that is growing at 8%, but everyone is poorer because it's one natural disaster after the other? You can get that. You can mathematically get that. right? And that is where this is an opportunity for sensible economics. Now, on to the countries. Yes, countries have to act because countries make policies. The point on the countries is, unfortunately, they have totally failed, right? Again, I mentioned 27, 28 conferences of the parties, 27, more than quarter century discussing and not doing anything. There is a reason for that. I teach international relations, so my unit of analysis is countries, right? It's relations between countries. I understand that. But one of the reasons why it is very difficult to deal with global issues, truly global issues, whether they be COVID, whether they be climate change. Now, what you saw with COVID was the same. It was a total collapse of the international multilateral system. Right?
Yeah.
Every country said, no, I'm not going to cooperate with anyone. I'm not even going to share ideas, not even my masks. My airport's closed. Don't you enter. Don't you come near me. Right? So again, if you think about climate, what happens? What happens is that the basis of international negotiation, international, as opposed to global, is that countries are the actors, nations come together. Every ambassador from every country's job is to do what is good for their country, right? You would want the Pakistan ambassador to do what's best for Pakistan. You would want the ambassador of Pakistan to negotiate in the interests of Pakistan. And now you have this magical, pata nahi kya, what are we smoking? Now you have this magical belief that if every country does what is in their interest, we will somehow magically come to what is in everyone's interest. Again, game theory 101, that doesn't happen. What you'll get is the lowest common denominator. Right? If every country insists on their interest, what you will get is the minimum interest that is common across them. Right? And that's the conundrum that international politics has. From a conceptual point, why a lot of these global issues, truly global issues, whether they be of health, whether they be of climate, we are finding so difficult to resolve by these means. Now, there could be alternative means. The international system as we have is also not very old. Westphalia. Right? Now, I'm not saying it's wrong, just like growth is not wrong. What is wrong is becoming slaves of these ideas that we ourselves created. And when we find that our assumptions were wrong, we keep trying to prove the assumptions right, rather than change our models. Right? That's the political economy question in all of these things.